Hello, friendos. Did ya miss me? If so, now you gotta kiss me. Or at least so the kindergarten chant goes. In retrospect, perhaps I should not make this decision based on the wisdom of kindergartners. They have never been known for their intense wisdom. Sorry it has been a little while, but hopefully you'll find this build well worth the wait. I wanted to mostly incorporate two elements of this one, the first being that A-frame. A-frame houses to me look like the perfect marriage of a very modern design with a very rustic cabin look. A lot of the reason I think it looks modern could honestly be just that I didn't really see that much of them until I was in an area where there happened to be a lot of lake houses. Keep in mind, I didn't have a lake house. I just worked at a restaurant that happened to be on a lake, and by virtue of that, there were lake houses. And the lake houses, as you may guess from the fact that they are lake houses, were owned by wealthy folks. So if a wealthy folk, is folk the plural? Is folk the singular of folks the plural? No, they are both plural, and I am being silly. So for the folks who can afford lake houses, to see these kind of A-line houses mix in there, I almost immediately associate them with being something wealthy. And oftentimes I tend to associate wealthy with much more modern looks. Honestly, I don't think that's quite accurate, because if I woke up and was like, wow, I'm wealthy, I wouldn't give myself a big old modern home. Nothing against modern homes, that's just not my dealio. I'd get myself a rustic home. That'd be what I want. Maybe like out in the middle of, not quite the middle of nowhere, because I'd like to be able to, order Pizza Hut once in a while. But enough that I could sleep with my windows open and not have even the slightest concern of, is someone going to crawl in the middle of the night? Though I guess if you live in the country, you might have that concern, except instead of, some guy, you gotta worry that it's like a bat. Now, bats are harmless, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want them in my room. So the secondary reason that I wanted to make this house was the laundry day patio-looking windows, the window boxes, which we might turn in just a little bit here and get a good look at them. You guys see it in the little corner there? You know what I'm talking about. So with those window boxes, I thought they looked really nice when they were stretched across diagonal, because the diagonal wall pieces tend to be actually bigger than the typical vertical and horizontal ones. A lot of the windows that stretch tend to stretch even bigger, and I really like the proportions of those two windows when they get stretched out along the diagonal. So I wanted to have some sort of octagonal look to it, where the window pane took up the entirety of that particular angle. So, the ending result was an A-line with a sort of cut in half octagon, which there may be a word for, a sort of cut in half octagon jutting out of it. Along with the fact that it let me put in those windows, I think it added some visual interest to the A-line. A-lines themselves obviously look classy, they're already eye-catching, but having that jut out just adds that little bit of something for your eye to follow. On top of that, I definitely incorporated plenty of bright colors, which, eye-catching, yes, but whether or not they're really cabin is to be debated, which is why I also was very careful to make sure I kept my neutrals more primary. I know that often is a challenge for me. I want things to be bright and colorful. When I think of stuff that I want that I don't have right now, because most of my owned items came from thrift stores, which means they tend to not be cool colors. So if I had money, again, this is a hypothetical situation, I would have funky colors. I want an eggplant colored couch. I think that would look so flippin' cool. But I can't have one, at least not yet. But soon I'll be rich, and I will live in the middle of almost nowhere with my purple couch. Where was I going with this? I remember where I was going with this. With a cabin, I feel like you can incorporate a lot of neutrals. It's supposed to look a little like it's something homemade. So a lot of the wood panels really stay with their natural neutral colors. On top of that, I wanted a lot of the furniture to remain pretty neutral, with a couple of exceptions, like those wicker chairs, which I later changed to bright yellow, that green desk chair, and plenty of bright, colorful accents. In particular, I wanted to have a good number of plants, as opposed to normal, when I only want a lot of plants. In this case in particular, though, I want to have a lot of plants because they reinforce that sort of natural feeling. If you're going to have a cabin in the middle of the woods, there's going to be plants everywhere. That's sort of inevitable. I guess not inevitable. If you had a cabin in the middle of the frozen tundra, then, there may not be plants everywhere, but it's still in the middle of nowhere. Same with a desert. I guess my point is, in this particular middle of nowhere, there's plants. And I wanted plant decorations to reinforce that. So I definitely have a large number of plants just sort of chilling around here. And on top of making the place look more alive, quite literally, because plants are alive, except not literally, because it's a virtual plant, except literally, because in the context of this game, who cares what's virtual, except not literally, because I should stop talking about that. So they add that pop of color, as well as giving this a sort of living look. Also for the pop of color, I had that dark, on top of the dark hardwood floors, I have a lot of rugs. And that's where a lot of the personality comes out. Because you see, while this is a cabin in the middle of nowhere, I want to be inhabited by this sort of hip young person. Specifically, I want you to imagine one of those grim fairy tales, the kind where like some innocent person goes walking through the woods like a fool, and they come across a cabin, and then they end up having to do the bidding of some evil witch. This would be if, like, instead of an evil witch, there was just some cool millennial type who was like, yeah, I just didn't want to deal with stuff anymore. I mean, you're welcome to hang if you want, you just gotta be, like, chill about it. That is the vibe I'm going for. And a lot of young women I know who, really have a lot of control over what their home looks like, they enjoy rugs. I enjoy rugs in theory, but I also tend to kick them up, and I don't necessarily vacuum them enough. Also, I currently live with carpeted floors. I don't really need a rug for practical reasons, whereas in this hardwood floor, rugs be totes useful. They're also really good for zoning, which with this sort of studio apartment look, being able to zone your house the biggest way to make it look a little more livable. So you have like the sort of living area zone with the bookshelf and the chair. You've got your sort of kitchen zone. You've got your sort of dining zone. The desk is kind of its own little zone. The bed area is its own little zone. The fireplace couch combo is its own little zone. You get a zone, you get a zone, you get a zone. Everybody gets zones. Zone, zone, zone. Y'all couldn't see it then, but I was waving my arms like I was dancing to zone, zone, zone. I assure you, it was not funny. So the indoors of this has a little bit of a cluttered look because it is, I feel like that's an inevitable aspect of a studio style layout. Things are going to look cluttered, and personally I think that's kind of the charm of the studio style live out. I've never really been much for minimalist looks. I want a place to look like this person has lots of different interests. So you got your weird little dog statue, which is made bigger. You've got so many air plants. And then you go think to yourself, how do you water those? And then you go, oh wait, they're air plants. They don't need to be watered. Whew, that's a relief. I don't think you'd be able to water those ones way high up. And then you go, oh wait, where in The Sims, those are decorative plants. I ain't gotta water them at all. And then you go, whoo. Not woo, like W-O-O, whew, which is hard to say without actually doing. The W-H-E-W, whew, that one. So with the exterior, I also, on top of the octagonal element, wanted to have this sort of rooftop garden look, because I am a real absolute sucker for those. So on top of having all the tile grass, I'm going to end up sticking a whole bunch of... Oh yeah, I guess there's someone down listening in the middle of recording this. So get all that grass down, and then put on all these wildflowers, which I think would be... Again, you don't need to actually water the plants in The Sims on account of it's The Sims. But with wildflowers, you don't even necessarily need to tend to them. You could theoretically just have a whole bunch of wildflowers up there, and granted, they would die. That's a thing that happens in real life. But in The Sims is a magical world where you can have wildflowers on your roof and they'll stay there forever. Also really want to incorporate that ivy growing all over it, because as I said, I want this to be a place that looks like it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. Really took advantage of those horizontal pieces that came with the vampire pack to really help not necessarily get that lush look, but sort of fill in the gaps where I'm not able to. Plants, plants, so many plants. Emily loves her plants. I definitely reapproached those windows like so many times because I could not decide if I wanted the windows to be exposed or not. Because on one hand, it's like, plants don't really care. They're going to grow where they're going to grow. And then it'd be like, well, I should care. Why would I put that window there? I'm going to cover it up anyways. And then I'd be like, well, then again, you can tell something was there and then it got covered. It adds a natural look. And my point is, I think too much about things sometimes. For example, I oftentimes, with these kind of builds, tend to get very symmetrical on account of the building is very symmetrical. So I would sometimes think a little too hard about, okay, am I going too symmetrical with my landscaping? Keep in mind that this lot has enough stuff blocking your eyesight that it's not like you could even tell. Like, you're not really going to be able to see one corner of those plants and compare it to the other corner of those plants. Did that stop me from worrying that it looked too symmetrical? Of course it didn't. Especially since, like I mentioned, I wanted this to look like it's, again, in the middle of nowhere. This isn't a curated garden. This is something that nature decided was going to happen the way it did. Except it is a little curated on account of I still wanted it to look nice, and if you let nature do what it do, sometimes it's beautiful. Like 10% of the time, it's something that you can paint a picture of. But the other 90%, it's just a tree. It's just another tree. Which is why I have a lot of respect for landscape painters who will spend the time to actually find that perfect landscape to paint. Granted, when you're painting, you can also take some creative liberties and, paint what's there, but maybe add a little emphasis in places to give it a real composition. Things will have a natural composition, though. And that's the difference between making something in Sims and making something in real life. Welcome to my TED Talk. Again, got more wildflowers. Honestly, the wildflowers I really like because on top of being like very tall and being very lush, they have really bright colors, and if you really take advantage of that, it can make a place look great, especially if you're going for this more wild aesthetic. And rocks. Oh my gosh, do I love me some rocks. I kind of wish there were more rocks in Sims, I'm not gonna lie. I want an expansion pack that adds more rocks. Because again, me overthinking things, I sometimes wonder if I'm using the same rocks and people notice it. That being said though, I think I have just the right amount of rocks here. And oh my gosh, do I love how that looks. That is pretty as heck. You don't actually see me do the back because I realized that while I was playtesting that the back was completely clean, which made absolutely no sense. So I went back and fixed it. So thank you all for watching this sim build video. Like and subscribe if you would like to see the next time I put one out. Occasionally I will also do streams, so if you want to follow us on Tumblr or Twitter, we will sometimes talk about when we're going to do some streams. So, thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Take care.